Hello, everybody. Daniel Thorniley here of the Central European Business Group, and it's my pleasure today to be talking with Przemek Szuder, who is the Managing Director of Central and Eastern Europe at Amazon Web Services. A little bit of background for you here is that we had Przemek speaking at one of our public webinars for our group members, where he was a panelist. Przemek spoke for 12 minutes. It was fascinating, but it was so fascinating we wanted to invite him back for a longer business conversation, and we're looking forward to that very much. So my first question, Przemek, would be, well, to say thank you for being with us, but then the first question would be, who are you and how did you get to be sitting in that chair today?
Good morning, Danny. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Who am I? So I used to think about myself as someone with unusual type of career until I've read the book Range by David Epstein, when I realized that actually I was probably just lucky and not really nothing unusual about me. So I started my career in finance and fast-moving consumer goods because I was always a curious person. I kind of loved exploring and moving around, and that exploration mode got me into a number of different experiences. So my last role or my last position with P&G has been managing the financial piece of Gillette acquisition. From there, I moved to Dell. And IT was always a kind of dream for me, a fun fact that not many people know about. I think I was 16 years old when I wrote a piece of software to facilitate personal income tax settlement. Of course, I never published that. It was more for myself, but I was considered being a software developer for some time. But then ultimately, I pursued the management degree. So from Dell, I moved to Microsoft, still in finance, where I had a number of different roles through COO, transitioned into sales and also partner ecosystem strategists. And since 2 years, I have a pleasure to lead Central Eastern Europe for Amazon Web Services.
Super, thank you. Interesting about the Gillette acquisition as well, all those years ago. And well, first of all, I'd like to set the scene. We're going to talk a lot about IT and digital, but also business generally and customers and people and everything. Could I start you off on the global dynamics? We've had a tremendously volatile and traumatic and tragic year 2020 globally. And here we are in maybe a second year of COVID, but with different dynamics on the vaccines and so on. I think everybody knows that it's been a transformational year for IT, work from home, all those dynamics. But for yourself and Amazon Web Services on a global level, what have been the key drivers and the key results?
Look, I think last year has been pretty much similar for every single area and every single region. And of course, I'm not that close, even though we are a global company, I don't follow that closely. And I don't have a chance to speak directly with the customers in the US. But I think, the challenges of the customers has been fairly universal, right? Which is first, working from home and how do we settle the employees there? And then secondly, kind of how do we streamline and smoothen some of the business processes? Like in Central Eastern Europe, the one of the most cumbersome process is all the legal documents. Like, how do you deal with that working from home, right? Where you still are required to countersign physically a huge number of documents and papers, pretty much on weekly basis. So customers then started to think about, like, how do I optimize and how do I become a bit more effective in this new setup? But I think today it's like, COVID has become a new normal. So the discussion is really, I think COVID is not a factor in the customer discussions anymore. It's like everybody understands there is just a different set of limitations. It's like air travel pre-2001, right? we just don't debate, right? You just go to an airport 3 hours earlier, but you just don't debate it, yeah? And I'm observing the same with COVID. People do not debate it. It's more about, okay, there is new set of circumstances. How do we become, the most effective, and how do we push the business forward given what's happening around us? So I would still say it's pretty universal. Yes, there is right now, I think, a divergence of how quickly different countries are dealing with vaccinations and everything. I think even within my region in Central and Eastern Europe, you see some countries that are moving pretty fast with the vaccines versus some countries that are like still in the low single-digit percentage. But I don't see that this is driving any immediate differences, like, in terms of customers' expectations or behavior. It may be like 6, maybe 12 months down the road, but today I think still the challenges are fairly universal and fairly similar.
Okay, thanks. But in that case, then I'll take us to, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and the region. Just a little bit of background for our listeners, and I think Przemek, you share this. Our surveys show, and talking with hundreds of executives, the business mood in Central Europe and even Russia from October, November started to improve a lot for a lot of companies, not for everybody. I'm not whitewashing anything, but a lot of executives were telling me, Danny, 2020 is turning out better than we could have hoped for. Many executives in the region have said the Q1 of 2021 this year has started well for many. We're obviously going to have some kind of bounce back, depending on the vaccines, the weather in the Northern Hemisphere, etc. So we're looking forward to that. And Central Europe and Russia, for the regional managers running that territory, I think they've got a good, 15, 18 months ahead of them. So that's the background for our region. Within that, Przemek, you talked, how there's the global and regional dynamics. And I've heard you talk about, the powerful transformation that you see with IT and digital. Could you tell us more about the region and that transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe also a quick reflection on what you said on the bounce back. Yeah, that's also something that we ask ourselves, because the bounce back is also to a certain degree a function of a very low baseline that we will face in 2021, right? So it's just, fundamental mathematics. So and I don't have an answer. I'm also curious to kind of see, because like mathematically we will have growth across many different industries and many different countries, but at the same time, is this a real growth, like in terms of compounded annual growth rate, or this is just a function of the low baseline, but then still we will exit 2021 in a kind of reasonably slowed down mode, right, compared to a non-COVID scenario. So that's just a kind of a thought from my side. On the customer's expectation, there is a number of I would say asks or kind of questions that is coming from our customers. So first of all, there is like pandemics has been a trigger to a massive rethinking of the infrastructure cost. Right. So, like, especially, I think I see it especially in Poland. Poland has been a market, the whole Green Island story and so on, which had relatively few external pressures to really look at the cost base and try to, squeeze and optimize every single element of it. I think a lot of these, total cost of ownership optimization projects are starting to happening again, right? And it also includes not only like ongoing procurement decisions, but also, what is the philosophy of the investment? Do we do CapEx? Do we do OpEx? What is kind of, preferential, and what gives you a lower cost of ownership short term? Because there is a lot of customers in the most affected industries who are saying cash flow is everything. So we are willing to modernize and we are willing to invest into the transformation and into digital, but it needs to be cost neutral and cash flow neutral in year one. And then like, it's not really that easy to achieve that because at the end of the day, every transformation is an investment at the beginning. So there is a lot of discussion about cost and I think I didn't see a lot of cost discussion lately, probably in the last 5 years, I think so. So this is clearly new. The other thing is, and that question gets asked a lot, is like e-commerce. Like, how do I do e-commerce? Is e-commerce a holy grail of the post-pandemic world? And I think honestly it isn't. I mean, you know, e-commerce is just another channel, but the real question that we are asking our customer is like, how are you changing the experience of your customers? Because you know, e-commerce will land and e-commerce will give a boost to your revenues only if your customers are happy with the experience that they are getting. And I've seen some interesting research which shows that with the first wave of pandemic in many industries with a fairly low share of e-commerce and kind of online trade happening, it got a significant boost, let's say March to June 2020. However, then it faded back. And people headed again into physical stores or physical services outlets and groceries, whatever. And my hypothesis, of course, I don't have a real hard data to prove it, but my hypothesis and what I'm seeing with a number of examples is if the experience of buying certain goods or services online is worse than what you can experience in a physical store or in a kind of, because it's not only stores, in a kind of traditional way, then you will prefer to go back. Yeah, and I even have a personal anecdote to share if you don't mind. So in autumn, I ordered for my terrace. It was already chilly, and I ordered this electric heater, that allows you to still spend some time outside, and it was just 3,000 watts heating device. So I installed that and I learned it's broken, like from day one, it just doesn't turn. Yeah. So I packed it back, ready to ship it back. And then the next day I get an email from the vendor saying, hey, can you please shoot a film showing that it doesn't really work? And only then we will accept your return. I mean, guess what? This thing is still lying down in my garage, and it's in the box. I never took it out, and of course, I will never ever, face this experience again. And I think this is really something that people need to take into account. That you need to reinvent every single element of your customer experience, and a lot of that is logistics, and a lot of that is what I call non-standard processes, which is when things got out of control.
Yeah.
When something is broken, where something is lost, where something doesn't work. These are things that are not easy to be captured in digital process. Digital process is great for like high throughput, standardized things, but these are things that are not that easy. But we still see those most innovative customers are coming and saying, hey, we would like to digitize, for example, our process with dealings with warranties or returns or things like that. So how do we deal with the broken part of our business? Because on one hand, if we deal with that, if we include that in digital, we are able to reduce the number of mistakes in our operations. But secondly, like I think each of us understand things may go wrong in business. It's natural. It's about how do you react and how do you fix it. And if you fix it correctly and if you fix it on time, typically you can even create a better customer experience. Because consumers will say, yeah, they screwed it up, but they tried really hard to make it up for me, and hence it's just driving the customer loyalty. So yeah, lots of discussion about e-commerce, and it naturally spills over into other business processes that are just adjacent to that, and a lot of that is in the logistics.
Absolutely agree with you, Przemek. I'll just like to take us a little bit further on e-commerce, and then come to, your services to your clients more specifically, cloud and all these dynamics as well. I obviously agree with you. We had the surge in e-commerce in the spring and summer last year, and then a little bit of normalization. Very generally, and you guys will know better figures than me, but very generally, if some of our consumer product companies in Central Europe, Russia, if their total sales were 4 to 5% via e-commerce before COVID, it shot up in the spring to 12, 16%, so double, trebled from a low base, and then went back to normalization summer, autumn to about 10, 11. So it doubled, but it didn't treble, and it came back. By the way, I have a wonderful comment, which I think you will enjoy. The managing director of one of our cosmetic companies said, people in this region, Central Russia, will always like to go to shops. Now, it might be a human comment as well, the social aspect, the friendly aspect, then going for a drink together afterwards, etc., etc. So I'm absolutely in accord with you there. Obviously, though, and this is my question, we think e-commerce will, if traditional business offline is growing, for the consumer product sector, 3, 5, 6, 7 good single digits, the cliche consensus is that e-commerce will grow good double digits. And, some of our group members are talking 20, 25, 30 growth rates. How does Amazon and Amazon Web Services, how do you see the potential for e-commerce? Is it a fairly standard interpretation, or do you think it's going to be much bigger or much softer?
Look, I can't really comment on Amazon. I don't really have an insight, and we really operate separately. But what I can tell you is we are again starting with from a low base in C. So I think in many categories you see very small single digit of kind of pre-2020 share of e-commerce. And I think there will be just a programmatic increase of that, like irrespective whether, we love to go to the malls or not, I just don't know. But I think irrespective of that, we will just see a disproportionately faster acceleration, because first of all, we start with a low base. Secondly, I think those peaks that you mentioned, they are creating a lot of in capacity improvement, but also efficiency improvement for the logistic operators. And they simply increase their operational excellence. And I think for many people, if the first experience is positive, they will just stay with this particular shopping category with e-commerce. So I think it will similarly, to the cost conversation, COVID will give us an additional boost, just because we are starting with a slightly different base compared to France, Germany, or UKI, which is already in a, I think, very different place with much higher share of online and digital channels.
Correct. Thanks, Przemek. We've touched so far more on e-commerce and consumer. Several of your remarks, though, have been overarching and general for business and that, but I'd like to come to a bit more business to business and your own services and that. What are the dynamics you've seen amongst your customers, and what they're wanting from you? And I remember on a couple of occasions, if you wish to repeat it, you sort of categorize companies in where they were in the transformation process. I've always found that very interesting. And, in the last year and the last 6 weeks, how have customers behaved differently towards you?
Yes, I absolutely think, and I'm not, it's not my own statement. Yeah, there is a lot of books and publications about saying that those that are really deeply embracing the innovation are able to be so much faster and more agile in terms of how fast do you react to the changing circumstances and the changing environment. And we have seen that, you know, every single day. So some of our customers, like Ringer Axel Springer, for example, in Central and Eastern Europe, who are a customer of ours doing most of their technology innovation on top of AWS, what they are telling us is that they have been just so much more ready for the challenges and the rapid pace of new projects, new reactions to the situations and so on, because they already had quit, you know, the need to build from the grounds up their own infrastructure and IT, and they could just spin, you know, on AWS services in a kind of matter of minutes. And for example, so when the COVID outbreak hit, they were able to build a brand new service, Medonet, which is their medically oriented portal and content information vehicle. It took them less than a week to really have it up and running. Yeah, so this is just the speed of some of the cloud services that you can leverage. Then I think there is this group that, you know, experimented with few services or few workloads, and they did something just to learn, or maybe just, you know, touch a little bit this technology and understand what it is about. And a lot of them are telling us that they wish that they were faster. And they are really accelerating right now the thinking about transition and what else they can digitalize, and how they also infuse the know-how into their organization. Because what I think that today is really showing up in almost every single customer conversation is not what I think people pretty much understand what to do, but it's how to do that in the context of their organizations and their skills. So a lot of customers are asking, and they are really leveraging. We have this migration acceleration framework, which is a framework that helps the customer to understand, like map their organization skills and competencies, and saying, hey, where you are on this 360-degree map of what is needed to really become very, very fast and a company that's super agile and able to reinvent. So we are working with the customers using that framework, and customers are mostly worried on, or like one of the big challenges is really the skills and knowledge acquisition and infusion into the organization, because the digital talent is scarce. Digital talent is really, really scarce. And what is unique in CEE, which I don't think you get in many other places in the world, is proximity to Western Europe and work from home, which right now means you can work for a customer in London, sitting somewhere in a small town in Romania for pretty much the same salary. Yeah. Right. So as much, we've never been so exposed to compete for talent in a much global marketplace. And a lot of our customers are really worried about the evolution of the salaries for the real cloud data science, data analytics type of experts, which frequently are hitting similar levels that are comparable with, you know, senior management board members' compensation. And companies that originate from CE, they have to compete with globals, with the unicorn startups, with everyone else to the same degree, and it's not easy. And we just see that a lot of talent is just being sucked out, not physically, but in terms of where they, you know, where they contribute and where they are really spending time and energy to build some of the new innovation and new solutions.
Absolutely. You've taken us there, Przemek, to HR, and I want to bring us back there towards the end. I'll just say before I do want to go onto cloud and the dynamics there. But yesterday, a company in fashion retail e-com was saying, you know, we're a sort of a nursery of talent, digital talent, and you know, people poach our talent, and you know, premiums of 25-50% of salaries. And they will do counter offers at those levels if they really want the person. Sometimes they have to let them go, etc. But you know, I couldn't agree more. I think in general, you know, non-digital talent in Central Europe and Russia is pretty sought after because, as I said before, the business has not collapsed, so you have to look after your normal talent. But digital talent, I think, is something that has taken off as an issue, and it's going to be with us for at least 5-10 years. And, you know, quite tumultuous, but more of that later in a way. One of the things, you know 1,000 times more than I do on this. I'll just give you one of these cliches and let you explain it or get rid of it. The cliche about a year ago was, certainly for Russia and Central Europe, you know, many of your traditional local domestic clients would be thinking, okay, cloud I will use for my commodity requirements and needs, but for the really sensitive and bespoke in-house things that we want to protect, you know, bluntly, we don't trust the cloud, or we don't trust your cloud. I imagine that's something that you and other companies have been able to massage and explain. Can you, just for myself and our listeners, where are we on that development?
Yes, so look, first of all, we need to factor in the reality of the legislation that varies across the countries, right? So that's an important starting point. So not everything is allowed and not everything is as black and white everywhere. But having said that, I am observing that most of these blockers are really mental rather than legal. And we are at least seeing customers in pretty much every single of these traditional industries really moving to the cloud and embracing the cloud rapidly. You have Moneta Money Bank, which is one of the largest banks in Czech Republic, moving very, very strongly into AWS. Aviva in insurance industry in Poland. You have Innogy in energy sector in Czech Republic. You have City Insurance in Romania. So these are some of these industries that has this label of being, you know, more restricted. But the reality is today, I think there is a lot of know-how and a lot of recipes in terms of how to really shape the whole compliance framework around your cloud solution. And with those customers that are really willing to move, we are helping them also to set up this part, because it's not only about the technology, it's also about the security, which is really non-negotiable for us. And I love to hear from our customers like CIO of Moneta Money Bank, who says, I was the CIO of a bank for 20 years, and finally I am feeling secure because I moved my entire application landscape into Amazon Web Services. So we are working also, and customers are asking for support in this, what I would call more softer elements or regulatory elements around shaping the internal policies, clarifying some of the questions or regulations coming from the national industry regulators or kind of privacy legislation. Yeah. So yes, there is a certain skill to learn how to do that and how to navigate, but I wouldn't say today it's any sort of magic. It's already at the stage of something being in a reputable fashion adopted by growing number of customers. But yes, for sure, there is still this perception that we are facing sometimes that customers prefer to start with something that's non-mission critical and not business critical, but then typically they also start to really perceive the real power of the cloud, which is not about the cost and not about outsourcing really. This is about creating and making your company more agile and reacting faster to external challenges, external triggers, and external opportunities. That's what those companies that are really deeply into the journey are telling us almost every day.
Thank you. You set me off there. Regulatory and legal, you know very clearly some of the big digital companies and digital industrial customers of yours, they have said to me, and you've heard me say it, the de-globalization of digital. So, 5 years ago, whenever, companies would say, we're going to have one global digital platform. And now, of course, with the tensions with China, Russia, everywhere else, companies are looking at 3, 4, 5 digital platforms across the world. Presumably, I'll speak as a layman, many of your markets are EU, so liable to EU law, and I imagine that would be relatively straightforward. But within your region, and certainly to the east of Warsaw, do you find the regulatory environment manageable, tricky, or very difficult?
So maybe let me start by saying I'm not really an expert here, because for me, CE is really Poland down to Cyprus, Malta, and Greece. So I'm not working with Russia CIS customers on a daily basis. Of course, EU makes the regulatory framework more friendly and also more standardized. It's not like I frequently see that some of the customers that are headquartered, for example, in Western Europe, they would expect that the regulation is 100% standardized. It's not the case. There is still a lot of peculiarities. We need to remember that CE is mostly, mostly, all of it is new member states, and the efforts to really catch up with European Union legislation has been mixed. So it's really different almost by industry and by country. And certainly I would say everything that is not EU will be a bit more challenging, because these regulations can be very, very different from what we are used to. And I would probably stop there, because I don't feel qualified enough to tell you how difficult or not difficult it is. But yeah, that would be my general comment.
No, that was helpful enough, Przemek. Thank you indeed. And I liked your comment about the banking executive who says, "I now feel fully secure." I forgot to mention that. It's a very nice phrase. I'd like to take us back now, as I said I would, to human resources and talent. You've already addressed it very clearly in there, but we have again a number of truisms, generalizations, and I wonder how you see it. In recent weeks and months, many executives across sectors have told me, our staff in Central Europe and Russia, we've always thought they were very good. And in the last 15 months, they've proven again that they're very, very good. So I heard everything you had said about, the talent pool for digital, scarce, and that opportunity to be working remote and very flexible, etc. But my first question would be on the quality of the people, and then taking us beyond. We've got these problems and issues now with salaries and digital. Where do you think we'll be on that in 3, 5 years? Because I can see with you the volatility, the inevitable upward pressure, but will that continue? Just going through the roof every year for 5 years. So what do you think of the quality and then the medium-term dynamic?
Yeah, so on quality and maybe also on quantity first. Yeah, so according to some external market monitoring agencies, let's call them, like Stack Overflow and so on, combined CE and Russia CIS is home to 40% of all developers in EMEA. Okay, so and it's a large number. It's around 3 million of developers. Then, according to some other people who are more focused on the quality like HackerRank and some others, they are also showing most of the or the largest markets in terms of developer population like Russia, Belarus, Poland, Czech Republic, Romania, consequently in the top 10 in the world. I think in the recent report, if I'm not mistaken, I think top 3 was Czech Republic, Australia, and Poland. So now the world sees that, right? The world sees that, and I think especially when you think about CEE, which is fairly safe and familiar because it's all EU. So, the risks are kind of fairly predictable. That's why you are seeing, we are seeing a lot of interest simply. And I would say there is almost every single month we are hearing about some major global organization which is opening another engineering, programming, development facility somewhere in Central and Eastern Europe. So I think this trend, combined with generic global and local demand for digital talent, I think at least for the next 5 years, Danny, we will have a talent problem, at least for the and again, forecasting is difficult, especially when it concerns the future. But I just don't see any immediate improvement because it's not that we know that we need additional 100,000 people. I'm just feeling if we add, tomorrow 500,000 of digitally skilled individuals, they will just find, home within the next few months. So I think this is a trend, and by the way, it's a global trend.
Yeah.
And that's something that is with us to stay, I believe.
Thank you. Excellent. And then, Przemek, if I may, I'm just looking at our time for our listeners and that. Maybe, again, another big strategy question. And as you say, it's always tricky to predict the future as opposed to the past. I think we're all very good at predicting the past. But on the big thing, we talked about human resources there, but all the transformation topics you've talked about and those trends, do you think now COVID has pushed us into this, a new kind of normal? And then from here on, it's going to be steady incremental double digit this each year for some of the sales and the revenues. And that will continue and we got the cost management and the salaries going on. So, that will be the business arena, the environment. Or do you see some more fundamental shifts, positive, negative, down the road? So it's a tricky one, I know, but the new business as usual, or more bumps along the road, if bumps can be positive? Yeah.
No, I think the business down the road means there will be more bumps. As simple as that. I just think, look, there has been a lot of discussion about growing volatility of the markets and the business in general over the last 10 or so years. And I think COVID is just another trigger which will drive increased volatility in the business. And naturally, there are some industries which will be more volatile, like travel, like hospitality, and so on. There will be some that I think will be less volatile. And I may be wrong on that, but I think in general, the kind of consumer goods, I think, are much more stable. Also, potentially most of the B2B, but then you never know because you can get a massive container ship being stuck in the Suez Canal, blocking the supply chains for many industries for weeks and slowing things down and so on. So I just somehow personally feel there will be, the volatility is there to stay as a part of the new normal. And I also think that, we are getting better and better as business to deal with that. I'm hearing from, for example, many of our customers who are saying, hey, we've set up this year a budget just for 6 months because we don't want to stick to a plan with, much shorter visibility, horizon, and so on. Yeah. So yeah, that would be my answer to that very tricky and complex question.
Thank you very much. A very nice piece of information at the end there. The budget process for 6 months, and whoever's doing that is wise indeed. You're absolutely right, Przemek. If you look back over the last 11 years, we've had the financial crisis. In the UK, we had Brexit. We had President Trump for 4 years, and now we've got COVID, and still some way to go on COVID as well. I think one of the concerns a couple of concerns I have is, in the developed markets, certainly, the strained consumer that we had pre-COVID and the future of work, informal work, part-time work, and so on, and wage levels, and how that global consumer will adapt over the next few years. I see that and the future of work as a challenge. But I take on board, your closing remarks. Volatility is here to stay, and yeah, I think that's a good way to round off, Przemek. It was lovely to listen to you again, and I'm glad we could give you justice and proper time on that. I know many of the listeners will be absorbed in your remarks, which are strategic and operational. So a very warm thanks from me and the team for that. And we look forward to seeing you soon in person.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.